Let's dive into one of these good old-fashioned 18th century sentences. He shall have power, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur, and he shall nominate, and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States, whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law, but the Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior offices as they think proper in the President alone, in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments. So this is what we're going through right now. And boy, it's proving an adventure. But each incoming president gets to appoint ambassadors, cabinet members, heads of department, a lot of other things are set by the president to appoint, and then they have to get a supermajority in the Senate. And that is going to be dicey with a lot of the incoming suggestions. It turns out that there is a bridge too far for the Senate these days, and that is Venmoing 17-year-old girls with notation of what you're Venmoing them for. Credible accusations, except against the president. That's what it takes.
Yeah. So yeah, super majority, not just the 51%, but 67%, 67.
Yeah. And at some point, I have to look up exactly when it was, but the Civil Service Act was passed, which means that the president doesn't actually do all of this personally anymore. The government is too big, and arguably this system got Garfield assassinated. Because in the first 100 and change years of the Republic, when a new president came into office, offices all over the country were staffed with political figures who had helped him. Not drawing any parallels whatsoever here, but the point is, postmasters were on this list. And the person who ran the customs office, especially in New York, that was a very prestigious job. And just all over the country, all of these minor roles were filled by political appointees without consideration for their ability at the job. And so every 4 years you could have a new postmaster, not because they were a competent postmaster, but because they had campaigned real hard for the current president. And the man who assassinated Garfield, probably schizophrenic man by the name of Charles Guiteau, believed that he was directly and personally responsible for Garfield's election based on a speech he had printed in the newspaper that probably no one actually read.
And he wanted an office?
He wanted to be ambassador to France. Did he speak French? He did not. Did he know anything about French government? He did not. Was he in any way qualified to be ambassador to France? He was not. Did anybody care about the speech that he claimed gave him the right to be ambassador to France? Oh no, definitely not. But I'm going to emphasize the probably schizophrenic thing here.
Yeah.
But Garfield had the authority to give him a government job. And the first 2 or 3 months of any president's administration involved seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of people all looking for handout jobs based on their political affiliation. Which is why Garfield's vice president, I believe that is Chester A. Arthur, stepped in and was like, let's pass a civil service act so that most of these jobs are handled in a more professional way and the president doesn't control all of the government offices in the country.
Does that include cabinet people or just not just other people?
Cabinet people are still appointed by the president. Heads of department, major roles, judges, ambassador. So Ambassador to France would still be under, the president's control. But I think it's possible that even Guiteau would know that, with a substantially smaller number of offices that the president controlled, the list of people that he was going to thank got substantially smaller. Honestly, this is another one where I would like to see a panel responsible for a lot of these choices. Some of these jobs are far too important to be purely political appointments. Head of the FBI is, I believe, one of the jobs that is currently a presidential appointment and really should not be. Certainly the person most in control of intelligence in the United States is a political appointment and looks like it's going to be going to somebody who supported the Assad regime, which no longer exists because he got overthrown like 3 days ago.
Yeah. So we get a little political here for a second.
Mm-hmm.
All the upcoming cabinet member positions, like Secretary of Health and Secretary of of those things.
Yes. Yeah, all of those are all still political appointments. And most presidents will, yes, they're putting in someone political, but they're putting in someone political who knows what they're doing. There was talk for a while about 4 years ago, making my governor, Jay Inslee, Secretary of the Interior, because the environment is something Jay Inslee cares very, very passionately about. Even The Onion was making jokes about Jay Inslee and the environment back when still hardly anyone knew who Jay Inslee is. To my understanding, he's a very nice guy. If you do your trick-or-treating in downtown Olympia on Halloween, Jay Inslee was personally giving out candy during his entire administration. So that's nice. But the thing is yes, Jay Inslee is a staunch Democrat, but also he's a staunch Democrat who knows a lot about the environment, which is a lot of what Secretary of the Interior does. You'd get staunch Democrats brought in who were really well informed about the public schools, and they'd be made, Secretary of Education. And what the current administration will be, the incoming administration will be doing, is what they did, 8 years ago, is bringing in people who have particular interest in destroying that department, who are also, in most cases, billionaires and major party donors. So, that's fun.
Yeah. And see, we have an anti-vaxxer going to be the Secretary of Health.
Oh, yeah. No, not to mention that he wants to remove fluoridated water because it's corrupting our precious bodily fluids.
Let's see what else.
I have such feelings about that man, and so does his entire family. That is the thing about him, is he managed to piss off the entire Kennedy family, and it takes a lot to get them all pointed in one direction that way.
Let's see, I see. quote, Dr. Oz is going to be in charge of Medicare and Medicaid.
Oh yeah, no, and I, as a person, on disability, am deeply worried about that because he thinks the problem with medicine these days is the patients. And yeah. Have I mentioned lately that my Medicare is through United Healthcare? Because it is.
Mine is too.
Hooray! They turned down the gel injections on my knees that might actually give me some relief from severe knee pain.
They turned down the capping on my teeth.
They've turned down an MRI so we can really get a look at what's going on with my body.
They haven't turned down. I'm getting a cyst removed from my hand. They haven't turned that down yet.
Yeah. But no, the problem is the patients, just ask Dr. Oz. And the whole idea of streamlining government is another one I have deep problems about. I will say, as we've learned, it takes congressional approval to have a new cabinet department. And so whatever Elon Musk is supposed to be doing is not going to be a cabinet department. Department of Efficiency is not going to happen.
Oh, the last thing, I think he said he's going to abolish Secretary of Education.
He can't do that either. He's going to abolish birthright citizenship, too, which we'll get to, because that's the 14th Amendment.
Oh, yeah. But, no more Department of Education. We don't need education. We don't need education at all.
Well, and most of what the Department of Education does on a practical level is deal with student loans. Like, most of the day-to-day goings-on in any given school district are not through the federal government. They are on the state and local level, which is why school districts are such a ridiculous mishmash of quality around the country. The Department of Education could put in a lot of recommendations, but they have very little power on the ground except at the college level. So that's going to be fun. We've seen over the years the problem with appointing ambassadors purely as political people in a lot of places is ambassadors are the first face of the U.S. government in that country. So what you need is somebody who knows what they're doing and can look, the way we want our country to look. And if you just have some guy who thinks living in Paris would be fun, that doesn't make the U.S. government look very good to the French government. It's one thing if you're the ambassador to, like, the Bahamas. No disrespect to the Bahamas intended here, but that's not a high-stress job. But ambassador to China, an ambassador to Russia, an ambassador to even freaking Canada, our important allies and the countries that we are most at odds with, those are really tricky jobs. Ambassador to Fiji, not so much. Your small island vacation nations, not a lot of stress of being the U.S. ambassador there. Ambassador to, say, Cuba, that's got a little more pressure going. Ambassador to the United Nations, you don't just get to live in New York and go to, theater and museums and things. That's a high-pressure job. And ideally, we would have people in those jobs who know what they're doing.
Yeah, unless Trump decides to take us out of the UN.
Oh, God. Yeah. The UN has too little authority to actually be effective as it is. That's only going to make it worse.
Yeah. Well, not just that. I can see him taking us out of NATO and joining the Warsaw Pact. That still exists.
Oh, yeah. No. Treaties, blessedly, do have to pass a supermajority of the Senate and he does not have the numbers for some of his plans.
Do cabinet members too, or just a majority?
Cabinet members too.
So hopefully they'll block some of the more incompetent cabinet members.
Honestly, some of his cabinet choices, I would be really, really surprised if they got through. I can't see RFK Jr. making it through Senate confirmation. Senate confirmation has traditionally been a bit of a rubber stamp, because Congress has long known that, okay, so you reject this specific dyed-in-the-wool person of the opposite party, they're just going to bring in another one. Is it really that big a deal? Even Supreme Court justices, by and large, have been relatively rubber stamp. Some of us are still mad at Joe Biden over Clarence Thomas, for example. But getting supermajority numbers for a lot of these, it might just be treaties that are supermajority, and it may be simple majority for cabinet and so forth, but I'm not even sure they've got a full majority on a lot of these appointments.
Even with the majority of even with the Senate majority they have?
Even with the Senate majority, I think there are still some Republicans who are going to look at some of these choices and say no. They're going to look at some of these plans, calculate how much damage it's going to do to their state, and say no. And the thing is, because they're senators, the odds of the public remembering that that's how they voted when it comes time for their re-election are pretty freaking slim.
Okay, so now the Senate has this power because they're the upper house, not the lower house.
Yeah. They are, in the thinking of the people who establish these rules, they are gentlemen. And theoretically would be, better educated and better established, and therefore the treaties need the approval of the gentlemen, and the, appointments need the approval of Congress and what have you. But genuinely, it's going to be interesting in the next few months to see how the numbers game goes on a lot of these. But he's never going to get into the Warsaw Pact. He's never going to have a 2/3 vote on that.